several years ago, for making extra money at the time, I was doing Lyft driving, and I picked up an elderly man, who, back in the 50s, he played baseball enough such that he wasn't good enough to be a pro, but he was good enough to get hired on to do USO tours during Korea.
Hmm.
And so he was traveling around, and he did that a lot of times, and he ran into various people, various celebrities who were part of these USO tours. So he learned, to one degree or another, not to be overly wowed by fame, even though he didn't necessarily was unimpressed. And so he came home he was home from one of those tours at one time, and he was walking along. He happened to walk by with a friend up towards a jewelry store that was, along the road there, and he saw a group of maybe 50 people standing outside on the street, gawking and talking, and standing around staring at what was going on inside. And as he and his friend comes up, in the jewelry store is Marilyn Monroe and Joe DiMaggio.
Wow.
And they're looking at jewelry. And so they're all standing there. And so this man, being who he is and not being really afraid and respecting, it's like they're people, decides, I'm going to go in the store and see, not because not for the direct purpose per se of trying to meet Marilyn, but more for the purpose of saying, it's a jewelry store. There's no law that says I can't go in here. There's nothing wrong.
I know that thinking well. Yes.
Right. Well, even his friend was kind of like, oh, I don't know, that might not go well. So he bravely walks in, and complete opposite of what you might expect. She happens to look up and sees him walk in, and she actually brightens up and says, oh, hi, how you doing? Could you help me for a minute? See, what she was doing is she was buying cufflinks for Joe. And so she said, I need you to come over here for a moment, because I need a man's opinion on the jewelry, which is a perfectly normal thought to say. It's like, okay, I'm a woman buying a gift for a man. Let's get a man's opinion on what would appeal to him. So Joe steps away, both because Joe was slightly more aloof, I believe, than Marilyn was.
Indeed.
And more for just propriety's sake, it's not really appropriate for him to be standing there when someone's, when decisions are being made about a gift for him. So he steps away, and this man steps over and talks for a few minutes and gives his opinions on different items that they're looking at. And he came away, and he had spent about 10 minutes and walked out the door, and that was he helped her choose one, and that was the story. And there's two different points to be made here. One is, for one thing, by having the respect, if you will, to treat her as a woman and not as something to stare at.
Yeah.
He got an experience that almost no one had, even at the time. Forget being one of almost very few people left alive who could tell you as a relatively ordinary person that they got to have a personal encounter with Marilyn Monroe. But even at the time, she would have been, even by Hollywood standards, one of the most protected people around. But the point I want to make for here is that he was quick to point out that the woman he met was very intelligent, well-spoken, easy to converse with, very comfortable. No one other than this man has ever spoken of Marilyn to me that way. I've never heard any description of her that speaks to the woman herself, a personality, an intellect, anything. Because if you think about it, that's a far cry from almost any role she played.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Almost any newsreel footage you would have ever seen. Focus on glamour, focus on beauty, focus on sex appeal.
Mm-hmm.
And even his historians, even the ones who would tell you they celebrate everything that Marilyn stood for. What you hear about, what I've ever heard about, is things she did, what she looked like, who she dated, and the tragedy of her death.
Yes.
No one but this man, who spent 10 minutes with her and is a totally ordinary person,
Mhm.
has ever spoken of her as an average person, or just who this woman is.